Oh, and before you want to well, we saw that it's that's not working. Anyone who wants to sit on the seat here? Oh, are there any
Because it's like just absolutely
not only that, whoever sits in the spaces will be coming up. Whoever sits will be
I really tried that. And that could be very
on the previous is that what you mean?
Well, these ladies are just on the way out.
Sorry. It's just
What is it you say? Is it Nana's or is that
Himalayan. Yeah, my sister has big something. Isn't it? I mean, I'm not.
All right, so good morning, everyone. We'll start with a recitation of God and Hagema, the hundreds of deities of the land of joy, are remembered by miracle. Then Geshe will, I guess, lead away with the recitation of refuge and bodhicitta. So stay tuned, things are going to happen.
So we're on page 7. From the heart of the Saviour, the 100 deities of the Shiva and the Ego of the cloud is only a tongue of extremely white rose turning of Dharma on his please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me on lions on lotus and morning and perfectly glorious smile, so grateful of merit for my mind and faith, please arrive on the nuance to spread the teaching. The holy mind has the intelligence and understanding to the extent of objects to be known. The holy speech with its excellent explanations is to be hero ornament for those who are fortunate. The holy body is ready to be beautiful with glory and renown. To you who are meaningful to see, hear, and remember, I prostrate. Pleasing drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, lights, and waters, and so on. Portions of the flower, offerings of ashes, rage, and emanated. I offer to you the supreme purification. whatever non-virtues of body,
speech and mind, especially those of that I have collected from being the Son, I confess each and every one with fervor from my heart.
You strive for much learning and practicing this
Generate age and make freedoms and riches as meaningful.
by abandoning any worldly
concerns, service would sincerely rejoice in your excellency deeds. Perfect, pure, holy, purest from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the dark.
Please let fall of aim the
From the sense of Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they are.
May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings and all transmigrating beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect, pure,
This teachings
to shine forever. This ground is not with perfumes filled with flowers adorned with our beautiful continents of sun and moon. I imagine this as woodland and offered. May all transmigrating beings enjoy this pure land. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lamrim and his two sons, may I and the members and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice and actualize the teachings of the corresponding Lord Sandraka, who had the morality of an eminently pure way of life, was courageous in the extensive conduct of the sons of the victorious mountain, and accomplished the labors of the stages of by the force of having fervently requested in this way, all of beings of white light, emitted from the hearts of the perfect, pure Father and Son, and combining into one eternal crown.
White nectar, the color of milk, flows from the opening of the tube of white light, cleansing all my sickness of spirit, harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. Page 13, the big Sema will recite 3 times. Nime Sereke Chenrezi, Jeneke Wampo Chamo Yang, Malu Samika, Kachike, Tsungka, Rosa Salvation, Matwa, Nime Sereke Chenrezi, Jeneke Wampo Chamo Yang, Malu Samika, Kachike, Tsungka, Rosa Salvation, Matwa, Nime Sereke Chenrezi, Jeneke Wampo Chamo Yang.
Sangi Chadam Sobin Chanunga, Chachi Bardu Dami, Kazichi, Tagi Chizi, Dola Dechi Sangi Tuba, Shu. Sangi Chadam Sobin Chanunga, Chachi Bardu Dami, Kazichi, Tagi Chizi, Dola Dechi Sangi Tuba, Shu. Sangi Chadam Sobin Chanunga, Chachi Bardu Dami, Kazichi, Tagi Chizi, Dola Kangi Tudini Zone, Tawa Tamsi Pambichir, Kangi Chun, Kodutela Chansero. Good morning.
Good morning.
Long time no see.
Long time no sing, Geshe said, but it's all relative, I reckon.
Telling on the Sanzam Dodi, Samdi, Shivalani, Lamjito, Shinitim, Sultan, then Lochidan Rumbase.
We've been looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's middling presentation of the states of the path of enlightenment, and of the 4 main points in the outlines, we've covered 3 points to go. Sorry. Today we're going to pick up on the 4th point. Let's look at the text. The 4th point is an explanation of the stage by which a student of the actual instructions should be guided. And there are 2 main points to that section. First off is the root of the path, explaining how to rely on a spiritual teacher. And then the stages of how to train the mind once you have relied upon a spiritual teacher.
Adirda dinza ta lamji tsawa said lamji tsawa slawandi lamji tsawa shimi pem chu ra kebachi bi kiwi shimi said lamji tsawa le tu yore sondi ta lamji tsawa shibi ta lamgu dradan chi ma khwara mena ani shimi pem chu shewandi ge ani kwa kenzachi galan rosigros ra.
So first off, it is said that the root of the path is relying upon a spiritual teacher, upon a virtuous friend. Particularly here, we take that to be the reliance upon a Mahayana spiritual teacher. So in order to understand the importance of relying upon a Mahayana spiritual teacher being the root of the path, first off, we need to get a head around a few points. Like, for example, what is the path that we follow? Without being able to contextualize that, it might feel a bit awkward or seem to be a bit awkward that for us, the root or the basis of what we do is relying upon a spiritual teacher. So we have to, first of all, contextualize that.
Duyores la Geshe lamji rumbati champanji dangazo and tuso tonzo de yumata kanji and lam said that he and tapto only tawa the tamji kimisala doshiki and tapchilaya lam sigures and nekab song tambayina susu dedan chiman namsuya and ngoni gichi dele zawadi lo sangbuki tilaya and lam sigures.
So the virtuous friend is the root of the path. Relying upon the spiritual friend is the root of the path. So then the path here refers to a path that is vast and extensive, and also a path of the profound. And in order to understand that, we can begin with the teachings that the Buddha gave, consisting of 84,000 discourses, which just the volume of teachings that the Buddha gave is vast and extensive, and also containing teachings of the profound. So then when we follow the path that the Buddha laid out in those teachings, the path leads us at the end to attaining the state of liberation or the state of Buddha, the state of enlightenment. It also leads us to attaining temporary states along the way before we attain the state of liberation and the state of enlightenment. It leads us to the attainment of pleasant states of existence or comfortable states of existence. Even the system is in total shock. So it leads us to, the development of those states of existence through also developing positive states of mind.
Tony Jigmebachi, Sivu Shudres, Nanzu Devi Chaginlaya, and Winzi Chide, Chi Nubu, and Chi Penjolo Soba, and Dangano Soba, that Kanjisiki, and a person Soba Chioba in the Yam, and Dylan in the Datu Sonding in the Middle, one Ramjin Tasum, and a Kadu in a Chitamanduada, Magiba Yon Devi Obadi, and Sivu Shudres. The any chi any chagian layer, thank you, the so the Nangi Sango layer, thank you about the passive yours that in G some Rimba, the Johnsugi, any Rimba D, the one is substitute Geshe should be and Takila to the Tevaka drinking is so sharp D ngaran chola ma ji lamde ya ji nangi ji me bai na nganju tele ya jantu menza di lamde nangi ki gegen tele ya ani shinyi segures yo shinyi segures inza nganju chidang namgi yuji lobjun chunjun ji bai na ya sin di gi ji chawa tuya gi chedo lobjun chego na ya gegen la ya matin tameji chagi yo inza de chimam nu sun drebi gi lam lobala da 인지 민지 기타 게겐지라 땡고보다 그 우유 차기도 왔어.
We begin with recognizing that all of us are looking for happiness and none of us wants to suffer. And we always act on that end. Whatever we do always is done on the basis of looking for happiness and well-being and seeking to avoid suffering and problems. And yet, though we seek happiness and well-being, we end up not getting what we actually want. In the different things that we do, we see how we run constantly, again and again, into problems and difficulties and suffering. We as the persons that are looking for happiness, the people that are looking for happiness, experience troubles, problems, suffering at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. So when we look for the reasons, when we look at the reasons for not getting what we want and getting what we do not want, we can first of all recognize that indeed there are some external conditions that play a role in our inability to get what we want, but it is mainly the way that we think, in the way that we think of our current situation that compounds our inability to accomplish what we seek. So then, in following the teachings of the Buddha, the one that was skilled in means, that gave those teachings with great kindness, we look at ways to, we look at new ways of thinking, to develop ways of thinking that will enable us to get what we want, happiness, and to avoid suffering. But then, in order then to do that, we rely upon a virtuous friend, a spiritual teacher. So this spiritual teacher is the one that teaches us how to engender, how to develop those new ways of thinking. And we rely upon that person in the same way that we follow upon someone that teaches us a new topic that we cannot understand, that we do not know on a code. So in the same way that you take up training, that you train in a new field of knowledge, and you rely upon someone that teaches you that, also here we rely upon a spiritual friend that teaches us how to develop a way of thinking so that we will get what we want. We will develop the happiness or the well-being that we seek, and will avoid the suffering and problems that we do not want.
어디에 다디 디지털이야 아니 야치 야담바 셈테 투바이나 아니 람데 창정 망통이지야 아니 셈테 투바이나 아니 소준 메시디 파케 징나리야 키 투비여버 디페시 소준의 냠뉴 유슬람나 마초바메스 요 아니 지 소준 메세나마야 누미 뮤식답딘서 제루야 게긴기 샤도 뚜친가 아니 게긴기 제사마시나 그게 요번하시 체니 아니 드르 카드는 때니 단디 차라야지 아니 지 그게 수준롱부터 카타요 아니 껴줄래요 아니 미세기 아니 가상스게 요마데냐 셈바디 페시 아니 킹게 창장 정된 메레 소지 셈바 기우소르지 대초야디 라마 기우시니 카데냐치 삼비기 상고디 소셈레스.
In relying upon a spiritual teacher, upon a virtuous friend, we are relying upon a guide that leads us to the development of those states of mind. And Geshe says that based upon his personal experience, he can see that if you attend your mind completely, in that sense, we can say maybe completely surrender your mind 100% to relying upon a spiritual teacher, it can make your life more easy, vast and spacious, so more at ease. At least Geshe says that in the years that he spent in his monastery, and he relied upon his spiritual teachers for 27 years when he lived in his monastery, where he was, you could say that in some sense, it was like a servant to his teacher. And also thinking about his life circumstance. So first of all, leaving his homeland, Tibet, going to India as a refugee, living in a place where it wasn't actually his official address. In that sense, you can say that he didn't even have an address, or it wasn't like his home place. Still, it says that in doing that, his mind was made more happy. So that was a path for him for developing a greater sense of happiness and relaxation. So at least from the personal experience that Geshe has developed, he says that if you attend your mind completely 100% to following a spiritual friend, it can bring about a greater degree of happiness and well-being. It sounds a bit like boasting, right? Geshe says that it might sound a bit boastful, but really consider themselves to be really fortunate for being able to rely upon an incredible master, an incredible Lama, an incredible spiritual friend. Having had the opportunity to ask questions, to have Dhamma discussions, to rely upon a spiritual teacher in order to get Dhamma instructions. How fortunate Geshe says he was in having that opportunity. And that being the case, Geshe says that there will come a time in which he will pass away. And the hopes, the expectations, the prayers that he has is that in his future life, may he be able to meet again such an incredible Lama, a virtuous friend. May he be able to again be taught the teachings of the great master Lama Tsongkhapa. And since we mentioned the great master, the great Tsongkhapa, the master whom we study this presentation of the steps of the path, then it's good just to mention that Lama Tsongkhapa has composed an array of teachings. He composed an extensive explanation of the steps of the path of enlightenment called in Tibetan the Lamrim Chenmo. He also composed the middling presentation, which is what we study now, and he also composed an abridged presentation of the steps of the path amongst other texts. And in his presentations of the steps of the path of enlightenment, he emphasized the steps of the path, such as correct reliance upon a spiritual teacher, a virtuous friend. So Geshe had studied this presentation before, and he also followed these instructions. So he's hoping that, as he's done it before, as he's doing it at the present, that he will also continue to do that in the future, here and hereafter. And also he's hoping that in studying this presentation that we also are going to be able to develop an appreciation of these instructions and regard them as very important, and as much as we can try to implement that in our own personal approach.
Tirda chidang sanji chomdin digi chwe ma song digi ani doji kamda mebala teni chwe chidang song yores. Inayang doji kamda mebala ya tu yorda inayang pena chik rik chik pena kasorda doji tamji madaba chwe tamji tongse dameba nyangalin deva shiva serdi ani chaja shidi ani di masong sajik zawni ni yomares duji kamda mebal deni dingi watan shawajik zawni ni yomares.
So the Buddha gave different sets of teachings, and those teachings were given to different disciples, people that had different dispositions, different sets of beliefs, different inclinations, different mentality, and so forth. And yet, some of the teachings cannot be altered or changed, even though they are students or disciples of different dispositions, such as, for example, the great seals, the four seals that signify that a certain doctrine is Buddha's doctrine. Those four seals are, first of all, the first one is saying that all compounded phenomena are impermanent. The second is that whatever is contaminated is in the nature of suffering. The third is that all phenomena are empty and selfless. And the fourth is that nirvana is peace.
But these are pena di thorbaina di shan shamba shebana and chugi shizakora la dodas. Did not shingi manzu lamrim shebi kabdulaya. The kashikashi in the tende and a chi suzu yolongo komshila sobare, suzu chunjong komshila soba, kanji dinji tone, and it shingy tenzu shiawan digi, lola mapa vatan, now mondo tende yon sigiros, mandulaya, and kia toma mabane, pachang embassy and Kenny Pigilaya Castle that said the muscle, so in Timmy for the Shaja in number six day in a yard, ding on to Pai Shachini, and Lamrim Shamba Shigins, Labdarina, and so in Chomekich, to zoom on someone, so in Chomekich, Tunguyanza, and the Geshe usually teaching, and she is.
So if you drop this topic of the four seals that signify that a certain doctrine is Buddha's, and you think that this is not relevant, you're rendering the very foundation of the Buddha's teachings to be ineffective. So similarly, we have here teachings that explain the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. And since students, disciples are of different dispositions, different mentalities, Geshe is taking into consideration that some will not be able to really get the head around the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. This is totally valid. It is possible that because of certain habits that we have developed in the past, because of sets of imprints that we have placed upon our mind stream in previous lifetimes, that our mind, you could say, is still narrow or not wide enough to also think about the topic of the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. So it is possible that that might happen, but it's not really valid to say that because of that, I can change the tradition or the path of the steps of the path of enlightenment. I can drop this topic and create my own version of the Lamrim. So even if we find this topic a bit complicated or challenging at the moment, and even though we might feel that we cannot totally get a head around this topic, Geshe feels that it's still considered to be a crucial topic within this presentation. So it's good to still think about it and include it in the part of the steps of the path of enlightenment.
And sangi chindar semlen jugore so nanjingi 소주 셈래야 팽고거레스 다 소주 셈래야 팽 마펜세디 남주 길에 예비 차단 몬숨디 고는 투마투래야 라리기어레스 다 딘티지 고는 버체발래야 상기기 취 시버다 마인바 취디 신이 디기 진럽디 셈을 주발래야 아니 셈을 주발래야 주비기 시다마스는 디 아니 취등인들이야 제직도 아니 이체온 대박 가와 요바지 디 실송토 셀람 주고야 디 아니 취역 냉가지래야 투디샤 인자 인지 토니다 아니 장관놈 쓴거 친구 람름 체인 총 참노로야 아니 신이된 슬라운드 때디 믹스기에 남주 원스다 지에요 마마도 무슨 지에요 바는 믹스기 피기래야지 아니 그게 남겨다 송이 슈라 소바 아니 투기 소나라 소바 참아배 만들어질 때 지금 송구면로 상송되지 람람은 당한도 냠도 로다 딘디요레스 라
Whatever we study, whatever we train in the Buddhist tradition, we take that to be something that needs to benefit our mind. It needs to be applied in a particular way that it benefits our mind. It needs to be done in a way that suppresses our afflictive states of mind, anger, attachment, and ignorance. This is what we deal with, right? So whatever we study at the end needs to be addressing our own anger, attachment, and ignorance and bring them down. So on top of that, we also then receive the blessings of these teachings so that they help us to suppress those afflictive states of mind. And in order then to be able to receive those blessings in our mind, we need to have faith and trust and sense of affinity or joy in the spiritual teacher. So in that sense, if we attend the mind to the teachings given to us by a virtuous friend, a spiritual teacher, through faith and trust and sense of liking, we receive the blessings of those teachings in our mind. And this is what is coming through Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation of the Steps of the Path of Enlightenment, the great or the extensive presentation, the middling presentation, the abridged presentation. All of them are teaching this mode of reliance upon a spiritual teacher with those attitudes in order to receive the blessings of the Dhamma in our mind. So appreciating the importance of that, then we correct our attitude in the way of receiving those teachings. And Geshe is hoping that we'll be able to then understand the importance of those teachings, to appreciate them, and then also it might become manifest in the way that we receive those teachings with a sense of reverence, with a sense of, even a physical posture, whatever we know, our dress or clothing or whatever, all of them might show signs of appreciation to the virtuous friend, to the spiritual teacher that we rely upon in order to train in the steps of the path. Now, with that in mind, let's go back to the text and pick up from the point that we've just left off. So we're looking at the fourth main point in Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation, an explanation of the steps by which a student of the action instructions should be guided. As we said, there are two main points. The root of the path, how to rely on a spiritual teacher, is the first. And the second is the sense of how to train the mind once you have relied upon a spiritual teacher. Or you could also say, why relying upon a spiritual teacher? This is the way of training your mind. So the first point, the root of the path, how to rely on a spiritual teacher, consists of 2 points. A somewhat elaborate explanation for generating certainty and the condensed presentation of how to maintain it. Beginning with a somewhat elaborate explanation for generating certainty, there are again 2 points. The first is the need to rely on a guru, since all excellent qualities depend upon them. It says here, first, all goodness, starting from the development of a single excellent quality and the decrease of a single fault in the continuum or in the mind stream of the disciples, has its own root in the sublime friend. The way to rely on him is important in the beginning.
Tela truth that tenja givishini gitsini lama givishini kanda jile tengores na givishini tsini samajile tengoenza and givishini tsini kanda jile damage gores lam ta givishini tsini tenja primin tsini and pama di and givishini tela chedep tembi surus tembi peyo madi minimi tedagi pendigo.
Now this topic consists of 6 points. So looking at the actual way to rely upon a spiritual teacher, we're going to cover the following 6 sections. First of all, if you wonder, what type of spiritual teacher should I be relying upon? What are the qualifications of a spiritual teacher? We're going to first of all look at characteristics of the one to be relied on, the virtuous friend. Then also, second, we're going to look at the qualifications or characteristics of the one who relies upon the student, we ourselves. Once we have made sure that the teacher and ourselves have the right qualifications, the third point will explain the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. Then we're going to look at the advantages of reliance, the disadvantages of not relying properly, and finally, the summary of the meaning of these points.
Re dambani jir songro gonden de cheba mi theba chimbi on de cheba mam push on jang der kewe kingi lamla jimki chini sanji gi lam theba chimbola chibi givi shin chi temba yunus denen dodi gene jidun chambung gombe shin towa shiwa ni shiwa yonden labo tuji longi chu denye ral tola makide sewe dani kyonga pongla des shi shin chu den chudang demba shik
Let's begin with the first point that explains the qualification of a spiritual teacher. So in explaining the characteristics of the one to be relied upon, the virtuous friend, we're going to have two sections. Identification of a guru and their characteristics, beginning with identification of the guru. It says, although generally speaking, in terms of the individual vehicles, a lot is said about this in the scriptures along with their commentaries. Here, only a virtuous friend who guides students on the path to Buddhahood, the Mahayana, but gradually guiding them on the path of the 3 types of persons will be presented. That being the case, let's look at the characteristics of that guru that leads the student along the steps of the Mahayana path. So first off, we're going to look at the highest characteristics, looking at the section of excellent qualities they themselves must need. In drawing from Maitreya's ornament of the Mahayana Sutra, the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, it says that the students need to rely on a spiritual teacher endowed with the following 10 qualities. So the 10 qualities are a spiritual teacher with discipline. They are calm. They are completely peaceful or complete peace. They need to have more excellent qualities with effort, rich in scriptures, who has thoroughly realized suchness, is eloquent, loving, and never disheartened. On that one rely. So having listed those 10 qualities of a spiritual teacher from Sutra Alamkara, it says, furthermore, it says that someone who has not disciplined themselves is consequently not in a position to discipline someone else, and that therefore a guru disciplining others has to be someone who has first disciplined his own continuum.
아니 랑기 규지 차단 모습 도야기 체도 아니 라민드니 추슈위어리 라미 최대한비 아니 퍼미 규지 아니 셈 도야기 체도 최땡기여자 당보 랑기 규트로 식 마존나 아니 디 셰비게 아니 젠기 규트로 세디 네요 마레스 딘자 토마 아니 랑기 규트로 라마 코랑기 규트로 고레스 디 야와 참봉 공베게 아니 투다치 토니 에로 안 송샤기 디레스.
So first of it says that someone who has not disciplined themselves is consequently not in a position to discipline someone else, and that therefore a guru disciplining others has to be someone who has first disciplined their own continuum. So we attend teachings from a spiritual teacher, from a virtuous friend, and we do that in order to tame our own mind, to discipline our own mind. The teacher that is teaching us how to do it need to have, first of all, disciplined their own mind. Maitreya here says very conclusively, very decisively, that if a teacher has not disciplined their own mind, they are not in a position to discipline others.
terda 직전에 캐나다에 초시대 직전에 용식 말했으라 아니 소소를 초여 비슷한 쉬워이나 다 가지 님은 송그리야 야오르치기 자원균이 같이 먼저 쉬가려야 아니 소소 세미나를 야지 다 대법해야 맨나마도 여대네 당도직 아니 타버도 대법기위 교수로지 작은도 아니 야오르치려야 세네리 잠블링이 메긴 통리 가리네 여대네 야오르치 비래 손주살에 슈탄단치 남사시단티 저기만하시 제진 샤비아규 지간의 슈스로 아니 슈스기 단지 최송사긴 잠블링 딩자 니나마 최송사 디기 슈스들이야 된 공부 탑자치 또 임바스르레도 아니 루모데 딘디 카이메 주치 어디지기 나는 슈트니 안 자오르지 다 좀는 되게 나셔비 아니 추구지마도 카이 메주치 참 장제지 나온 오니기다 지 라마 레이 상상치 로 어딘지 소소응니 고티와만 보게 바샤도 기레라 아니 소는 또기 안딘지 지기도스.
So this first point that states that a teacher need to have disciplined themselves before they discipline others might be somewhat difficult to relate to. Geshe is wondering if we can appreciate the point deeply. Just to illustrate that using an anecdote. So for the last 3 days, yesterday, the day before, and the day before that, we have listened to teachings that His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave online. He taught in praise of the Phantom Rising over 3 days, and Geshe says that just looking at the way in which His Holiness was conducting himself, at least for him, was also a source of faith. So of course, coming from Geshe's position of background, you have trust or faith in His Holiness. You can say that first of all, he has a certain reputation. Also, is a human being in this world, but also is the Guru, a Lama that we follow. So he gave teachings, and if you look at the backdrop of the teachings, the room that His Holiness was sitting at, the arrangement, His Holiness's seat, the table in front, everything was arranged in a really simplistic way, in a really simple way, rather than kind of going full on with extensive decoration. His Holiness was sitting on a kind of really, you can say, old seat. Didn't look very fancy. There was nothing kind of really fancy in front of him. He was wearing his monastic robes, his chugu, right? This yellow cover. And his demeanor was like a genuine, fully ordained monk that follows the rules and the teachings of the Buddha. So being able to see His Holiness like that in kind of in a simple appearance of a Buddhist monk, follower of the Buddhist teachings, Geshe said, of course, that is also attributed to merit that one has accumulated before, that also enables one or helps one to generate a sense of trust and faith in that person. But anyway, Geshe connects it up with the first point. The teacher that has not disciplined themselves are not suited to disciplining others.
어디래 딩가 딩이 손만 됐어. 근데 걔네들이 저슈슈 이기마 딩이 당한도 안 잠블링 딩라마 되니 아니 깨지시데 갑질 레바이자 소수 손만 디 시샤와이나 딜이야 냉가스키 토마스스 아니 nganzu ta pheri ani jana nalore indila ya chi lama tu so pena jana gi lama tu so yimba yana pi ani chinga chimbu shu konchimbu shu pe ani kel ta chi ani o dinji gi thon ta chi doja pi ta chi si gi ne yang so ro ani pheri lama ma chi ji gi pe ani shamu ji bu shu ani chi ji bu shu ani khochen dramanda gi chi dolo dramanda ji bu kan kanji 아니 치기 남규 돈이 아니 두지 니무 정고 면도 삼삼저지 남규 땡땡이 빼망부여레스 당무라니스 빼망부여레스 이나야 야ವ르무지 딜리 싸우니니 다 야ವ르무지 사지 요마르데니 싸우니니 오늘 잔내게 좀 된데기 다 진중 몸마 돈이 난그 여버디 소순 지도 쓰는 진짜 디 선앙 돈이 쉬바이스
Anyway, it's just a small anecdote that Geshe is sharing with you. Now, this is his personal experience or personal feeling. It's not a really significant point, but Geshe said that just looking at the way that his honest was dressed, the whole arrangement of the room and so forth, for him symbolized humility. For nowadays, you can come across different teachers coming from different traditions. They teach on different platforms, either you can attend teachings in person or see them on the net. Now, some of them, for example, sometimes when you see teachings given by teachers in the Chinese tradition, they look pretty impressive. Not only they wear the robes immaculately, but often there is also this big rosary, and big mala with impressive beads that is tied around the neck. When you look at Tibetan teachers giving teachings, also, they come with fancy hats and really beautiful, and they come with fancy hats and beautiful thrones, very high thrones. The robes that they wear are also very elaborate and very beautiful. And it seems that sometimes just this whole display is so magnificent that just by the power of it, they're assuming to be taming the mind stream of others. But his honest approach is different. When you look at the way that his honest is giving teachings, rather than having that massive backdrop of fancy hats and high thrones and so forth, just in looking at the teachings that his honest gave in the last few days, these teachings were imbued with a sense of humility. So Geshe said that at least for him, that was one of the things that was standing out.
Yeah, 망지하게 뒤집다 지 라마라 친다다 지 미요다 지 콜망부요니도 소소기 슈샤이나 지 부시오스 페지 나올라야 센드라문다 땅주문드라문다 거지 다간지 비기 아니 칼라사자 고겨야지 지 부시오스 페지 인디어레스 디어레스 정신 이나 자오로지 카즈다 아니 제당 깽이지다 되나 깽이 트럭셔를 통해 야오로지 슈샤라야 슈지 담블이야 쳔나야기 고급지 좋은 거래요. 야오로지 숨존한테 내가 주도 사고로 왔을 때 온디 야오로지 숨존 내도 다가라 플레어기 신파위지 잔 남대 겨지면 될래야 루몬 드라마다 쳔 드라마다 싸우니는 문도 왔지. 먼저 통성스러 딘디기 슈사디 대초 초시지 통의 슈지네 아니 산지긴 동안 요소 저버디 원이 참바데 세베톤 도잘라마 나와이나 디 두지시긴 도투야지 요나티 용거마도 딜리시 칸르지 남기 때인데바나 아니 산지기 최우톤이 두츠직 차요 말이스.
And sometimes you come across those lamas that are very famous. They are considered to be those great lamas. They have a great following. And it seems that also when you meet them, there is like this whole fancy or opulent environment that they live in. Even their dining tables and chairs seems to be really expensive and elaborate and big and so forth. And there are beautiful wall paintings around. But then when you look at his honest residence, and you can see that in the teaching that his honest gives from his residence in India, or those of you that have been there in person, the walls consist of just plywood, right? No fancy painting, just plywood. And His Holiness is teaching with a sense of genuine love and concern for the students, the disciples. Whoever listens to those teachings are given with a sense of love and concern, which for Geshe symbolizes the point that a teacher teaches others having disciplined themselves.
Anichi dolore, ching corre, and desa did this huge which on the pe, and that huge inside something, Lunga using Tediachi, Mumbi on the Yungoras, the only Sangi Chugtoni, and Dojan Dutsuki, Lamdi, the Remudas, Tinza, Jangalamatunga Chim, the Nema, and singing Somanashi, one Tanigi, Tovasho, Nevasho said, that Dandi, that Zamani Nanolaya, Chedang Arasugi, Nadangada, that was in Jema to the Maduita, Yordania, a Jawarmuchita, Hajang Kumbu, or Dindiji, Cabredo, or some so Sam the Dindis 12 years.
Sometimes we come across spiritual teachers, spiritual friends that might be very impressive in terms of the clothes, their abodes, their retinue, and so forth. But then, while there is a possibility that someone would be impressed or inspired by that, and that will cause them to engage with the Buddha Dharma, still, when we think of what is the real essence of the Buddha Dharma, the real essence of the Buddha Dharma is not to be that magnificent, not to have a magnificent house or clothing and so forth. It is about really taming one's mind. So for that His Holiness, Geshe reckons that His Holiness is the epitome of that principle of taming one's mind, and how rare the opportunity is to come across a genuine master that embodies that aspect. So as we said in drawing from Maitreya's ornament to the Mahayana Sutra, a spiritual teacher should be disciplined, they should be calm, and they should be completely peaceful.
Tirda dance Ramadevi Nemevi Shendu Lamadi, Tomarangi, Gutuashi Gosos, Wana Chitratuashi Gwenyamna, Khan Jonjung Gidaba Cheni, Toby on the Mutu Tower, Gilly, Nupembies, Benechi, and the Tangoshi Wadachi, and it's going to test you about some gi. Ani Gutu Lama Sigmares, Gavit and Chitam to be Gutulus Godi, and the power which soon the Navy, Dual Sova, some souls.
So let's continue with the reading. Let's read actually from the beginning of this paragraph again. Furthermore, it says that someone who is not disciplined himself is consequently not in a position to discipline someone else, and that therefore a guru disciplining others has to be someone who has first disciplined their own continuum. You may wonder, well then, how should it have been disciplined? So is it that it's enough for a teacher to have clairvoyance, so to have supernatural powers and the like? To that, Lama Tsongkhapa says, having done just any practice, labeling it an excellent quality of realization and having it in your own continuum is no benefit. This is why a system for disciplining the continuum compatible with the general teachings of the victors is necessary. That has been ascertained as the three precious trainings, and therefore the three ethics and so on have been set forth. That's all.
Tell Duan to Ilabadi, Susutavali, Tautum Baby Dawai, Samdan Kamu Kavala, Tumbi Sunni Debayi, Sabi Susuta, the Shirkum Batar, Tamungu, the John Kingi, Sub Sambin Dovatar, Ambu Lobby, Yuki Chama, 따문고따고 자마이 벌 주나 탑주지 베바트미 차오위 초는 주버지비 수dum을 라비 샘기 따투지 제보스.
So we're looking at the first quality of being disciplined. Now it says in this regard, discipline refers to the training of ethics. In the Sutra on the Vows of Individual Liberation, it says, in accord with the unruly horse of the mind, always straying away with effort, a bridle studded with hundreds sharp nails, thus individual liberation. In explaining that, it says someone skilled at breaking in wild horses tames them by means of a good bridle. The sense powers pursue wrong objects like wild horses. Ethics subjugate them as one engages in inappropriate activities and makes one engage with much effort in what ought to be done. Someone trained in it has likewise tamed the horse of the mind.
Shivanis, the level Jabata, never Jibi, Judola, Chambadi, Sijan Tembi, Sam Nand, Shivani, Tingin Zimpi, Habakebo. Newer Shivanis, Sam Lisron, Shinila Tem, Yanda, Vitan, Susu Jibi, Sheriff Habakebo, Kadal Habasum, Jutua, Chibi, Toby Yonde, some of the Tembi, Machoki, Longi Yonde, Dengubi, Longi Chuk Chivani, Denasum of Mount Kiva Dembos.
So we spoke about the first quality, which is being disciplined. Then the second is being calm. It refers, or it means having developed the trainings of concentration in which, based on mindfulness and vigilance with regard to engaging in good and counteracting faulty behavior, the mind abides in a state of inner calm. Now, the third quality is complete peace, and it means that based on the shamatha, a practice of calm abiding of a supple mind, the trainings of wisdom has been developed through individual analysis of the meaning of reality. However, it is not enough merely to have developed by means of the three trainings in this manner the excellent qualities of realizations that act attempt to continue.
Yeah.
I know it's an analogy, but just going back to that quote from the Qualification Sutra, I know it's an analogy, but I can't help thinking about the horse with the bridle of hundreds of sharp nails. What are they doing to the horse? And I guess, we do have the analogy, we use the other analogy with wild elephant and the use of, and holding it with the rod. I get that, but anyway, it's just playing with my mind with 100 sharp nails.
All right, so I'm just going to repeat the question first of all, for the people at home, but also for those of you at the back who might not have heard it well. So Venerable Chuki is asking about the analogy that is taken from the Pratimoksha Sutra. Let's put it on the screen. So it says, in accord with the unruly horse of the mind, always straining away with effort, a bridle studded with 100 sharp nails. So that Chugida says that sounds quite vicious, quite cruel. We have another analogy that sometimes is used for the development of concentration that is come about in using the practice of mindfulness, in which an elephant is tied to the peg of the object using the rope of mindfulness. So that analogy of the elephant and the rope of mindfulness, it sounds pretty animal friendly. But the other one, a bridle studded with 100 sharp nails, that sounds quite cruel. And you know that it's not literal, but still, what's the goal? What's the deal with that? Dila soso tabale den de pechik shadwa di pain ba di Quran how dosa ne pedila de sonan den de madeo den de ligidusa. Kan sena dila tarto bebe dawa I sempta kanen kawala tumpe zernum gyabai da de Sanung Gava is a the Shinanza within the Tongidosa. Tala than the Natsa Tai than the chick Tongidosa. But Shineting is in Gombaina Dilla, Dan Lampoche, Dan Taba Dilla, Lampoche Chi, and it Taba Dilla, Chamber, then the chick Pechik Shagawa. She hasn't then the Lampoche, then the Natsa Tai, Nova Care, then the Pechik Shagimades, Cab Dilla, Tala, then the chick. Sir non gyavasya di Shinanza within Tongidosa, Tikarinas.
디 미기 미드 지기 열어왔어. 지기 여버 디 빼내 샤르마도 디 제거를 쓴거 말이었어라.
Well, there is a certain analogy that is provided here in this sutra. It is an analogy to things that sometimes are done by human, but it's not that all of them behave in that way. No, it's not that we have to do that.
자기 이 만두다 안따 그다 아니 쉔 로고디 곧다 랍고고라스 랍이 카드라 미디 치고라 디 치온 따그 칸드진 바이나 아니 라키로고라다 어 디난싱기 만두 셈 고보디 몸바 고보델이야 아니 작저지 마지 봐도 아니 뚜르투 메바디 디 쳔고라스로 마도다 디
There are people that are working at breaking in wild horses. And some of the methods that they employ are quite cruel or quite strong. So the analogy here that is used is saying that if you have to break in a wild mine, you have to be forceful with the mine. It's not saying that we need to be cruel with horses and so forth. It just says that if you actually need to be forceful with the mind, by all means, you need to do it.
Zambali Namalaya, Pedi Hamba, the Matangwa, the Chick Marab Samalo, and me Chigdosro, Pig Tundro Jensen, so in a so trouble Yadi, and a Pame Chiag Chedu, Simjin Shin, and Jangitis to Jayarmada, Simjin Shin Sigmundosro. So Toto Kadulam Rochi said, and Sayadi, the Toto or Dumanyangore. The Shembaki Shingium and Kamiguru, Tanganzu me. 아니 소소 저거야 대사요 배우시면 다음에 논주 체계제도 아니 시행랑 몸이야기 제도 독자 쇼치기도 하더라.
Actually, if we understand all the different things that we do as human beings, rather than becoming proud of being a human being or thinking that that's great, I'm a human being, it's actually, you can say that you can get a bit embarrassed. You can become more you can develop a sense of humility when you start to understand the way that we act as human beings. We act sometimes in such destructive ways. We abuse others. We are dishonest in our approach to others. We use and abuse others. We do that to an extent and scale that is much greater than other living beings. If you look at animals, for example, then animals, while some of them prey upon others, still when they have their fill of food, they do not engage with more activities that are not unconscientious. Of course, you could say that there are different species or particular species that still engage in unconscientious activities or behavior even after they have fed. But in general, you can say that something that is quite common in animals is that even if they prey upon one another, once they had the meal, they kind of retreat, they get a rest, and they don't continue with that behavior. But we, as human beings, with an ever-increasing sense of desire, even if we have enough to get by, even if we have enough food, even if we have good home or good shelter, for us it's almost never enough. We still have that aspiration to have more, and behaving in a way that is unconscientious, we take advantage of others, we cheat others, we act at the expense of others. So actually, looking at the way that we do behave as human beings, you can say that it creates that sense of malaise in one's heart.
ngazu mila kin tizuru che mendo sro pena ngazu le ya tsawi gi ta chi simje yo do chog sem ya chadam mo so yore mombi shang chu go re chabi shang chu go re ani tawang shang chu go da ine tonro simje yin ba na pena ani chaju che da tizu do se kola ya ngazu mila tizu tsawi ni me ba sro kanji mi ti samno tang ba na Tang tuya namji yori mado madam ena pe massive maravre dasra pe massive maravre dasra.
Of course, in general, sentient beings are governed by afflictive states of mind, by anger, by attachment and ignorance. And there are occasions in which different living beings engage in activities based upon those afflictive states of mind. There are occasions of anger, of attachment, of ignorance, and so forth. But still then, when we compare ourselves to other living beings, you can say that on one hand, we have a greater sense of intelligence that we can put to use. But then on the other hand, we also give way to afflictive states of mind. Other living beings, other animals, for example, have particular periods in which the mind is full of lust or attachment and so forth. With us, it's completely all over the place, right? It's not that it's limited to certain times of the year or certain duration. It seems that at any given moment, if we can give way to that sense of attachment, passion, and so forth, we by all means give way to those afflictive states of mind. Shukila?
No, it's okay. Thank you, Geshe. That's very useful.
Thinking. Control Mark.
Mani ga chawda.
When you have the understanding, conviction, and motivation, why your mind still needs the pain?
So when you have conviction and
So you have understanding, conviction, and motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Why does your mind still need pain?
For what?
To get discipline. To
Okay.
conviction.
So the question is, why is it that even if your mind have conviction and motivation and so forth, why is it that the mind still needs pain in order to engage with them? Did a sozo semla then the ichiyo ba tewayo wa kuno sambo yonayang tal lamdi jogbegi tendala yan dungen then the yogo get rest then lagerwa dungen mena then the ji nyamle kaso tusan gonson yongi mares in lagerwa chezan kesi kuno yawoyo na tewa yawoyo na then the sem then the tsamayo na dungen goya gi gyumchen karinas
Ma chagin tsama tsayo na ani dunga gorse titola dunga gorse ji yomarda sira chidang nanzula ya dunga yobayna dunga digi kenchini an chula juktu yagi lam roris lagmado kanana ya chagin tsama tsayo na ani titola dunga gorse di yomardas.
Well, Geshe reckons that if you have all the conducive conditions in place, you would not need suffering or pain in order to engage with that path or with those teachings and so forth. If all conducive conditions are present, pain or suffering will not be required. But it's often the case that we don't have all those conducive conditions. And when we don't have all those conducive conditions, then pain or suffering could be a trigger for engaging with that path.
Ranganzu jigdengi kane neche suzulayan twingin pusum soba yueche nekab ga kanghas ke mebayna chue tingmarasta ro nganzu dela yongye nala debayna and nge charanzu manche tar jigyo mars lagwe de ne manche jig ani suzugi ani karso daji zada danyamdore and suzu mizi geromamari kangaji table ten mambuchi dirichini yungudas kaya penjore ji sazan di kaya mengi ko kiwu chene and tizu tagaranga tande amado chela sam mankuni pe mambu yorwas di thola sungu sare dungo gol sedi.
If someone lives a happy and comfortable life, in a life in which everything works perfectly for them, it's likely that they will have no thought of practicing the Dhamma because there would be no impetus or no trigger that will cause them to turn the mind to something else like the Dhamma. Geshe says that he doesn't know the personal circumstance or circumstances of many of us here, but in general, Geshe reckons that although we come from a certain background, right? So we have relationships, we have families, we have certain occupation and so forth. Still, there's something that causes us to be interested in a tradition like that. So Geshe reckons that in many cases, although our life could have been quite comfortable, still there was a personal pain, a personal problem that made us look for a certain way or certain method for dealing with that. Otherwise, Geshe reckons that in general, if we had no problems whatsoever, if everything worked for us completely, perfectly, there would be no wish or no reason to change it. We would not be looking for anything else in order to improve our situation.
Maybe I have a lot of questions on this one. So here we're talking about using strong measures against the mind, right? And then we're talking about the teacher being disciplined. So we look at the quality of them having discipline. We can't see their minds, all we can see is where they act and speak. And so, but then we also have that if we need strong measures, then they can be quite wrathful. But for us as, for myself, to be able to distinguish, I'm unable to distinguish someone being wrathful because you need that strong discipline, as opposed to somebody whose mind, they haven't pacified their own mind, haven't disciplined their own mind. So it's really good. Shed some light on that.
All right, so again, I'll repeat your question. So you said that we spoke about sometimes needing to have strong measures in order to subdue the mind. Now, the first quality of a spiritual teacher is being disciplined. Now, if they haven't disciplined themselves, they cannot discipline others. But sometimes you could say that the way to discipline others is being wrathful with others. So while we cannot really see the mind of the teachers, you said that someone like you cannot really see the mind of the teacher if they're disciplined or not. When you see someone behaving in a forceful way, in a wrathful way, for someone like you, it's difficult to know whether they have disciplined their own mind or not, or how would we know if that person has disciplined their own mind? That's what you're asking, right, Shugina? Tadila, atopeden da chikshado, the tumba sednum gawai, and dik rangi, sansan sem duela, then the tabo than the chebo rest in this soimba. Tadi Gewashengi Seni Tambo di la Tua Sigrwa. Ta Shensem Sebo Matone Tadi Gewashen in Saint Duma du Dente Gacha Gatamba, Musutong Mendoza. Ta Sansan Shensem Duegi Chedu, Tes Chabo Chegorwa. And gewa shenyin sansan shetsu nansu di chakbo go ne chegerwa. Chensan chakbo go ne chewa ina khonso sem duma du soso kande chik haku gres. Di ngone chakbo rebe chakbo namba chakbo tsu tengi yores kande chik haku gres.
Tachadan chakbu go ne soman dutsu di and Gedu Johnson di Suzupu Putu Johnson di Pinyanda Tang and it Sotam Tang Don Abo Tangi di tutso di ku turub ya karso chi sammanzum tende yunguyosa sangudo stangede shushing marde kanji dandi turub di nangla ya peshi ani ta jawron chi songdan re zambali mambu ji ki pi labda da tu samon rotang ton di turub di yugyo rochik yu sagyo rochik redo asra.
Being wrathful with a certain student is something that sometimes occurs in a certain context. In the same way that, for example, if you're a parent, there are times and situations in which you need to be more forceful, with your child. It might be that you either punish them for something that they've done, or that you scold them, that just your facial expression or your physical language might be more menacing, just to instill some fear in them for a particular purpose. But this is all something that is changing through the passage of time, in a sense that it was something that Geshe feels that was more common in different society at time of old, but it seems that this is something that is changing in many places around the world at this day and age, to the point in which it seems that this way of either educating one's child or providing education at schools and so forth, this way of educating is phasing out, it seems.
And pa shim rona ra ani chi namgyu chi kaso ta chi sojun chalsigla ra the physically sojun se kanji ani kola chi sam namgyu shenji ten zuma tham ro de di ani tutsa da mazno gyurum jile ya tikki thuya de khakbu shu yores ra nekam ya chi gogortan thune ya gyu thuni ani di ko zumba inza zungu tenrugres inza anji loma da ani lama shim jona kanji ani mideli shim gyurung di shim jona ani ku shigare samlore samalo potuya yungu yoras
Rimbo shimna sena takchu chena.
takju chena.
And as you said, Turkey, it's hard to know or to see directly somebody else's mind, particularly if you look at it in terms of isolated or local situations. If someone is creating a display in their behavior, in that sense, you can say that they're behaving in a way that is hypocritical. Whatever they have inside is different to whatever they display externally. That mode of behavior can be sustained only for a certain duration. It is likely that if someone is being a hypocrite, in that the way that they behave is quite different to what they have inside, they will not be able to sustain that for a very long time. So rather than looking at isolated cases, when a student relies upon a certain teacher, first of all, they should have examined that person over a long time, an extended period, in order to have a better impression of that person. If the supposed teacher or the candidate, let's say, for being a teacher is actually a hypocrite, in that the way that they behave is different to what's happening to them internally, it is likely that a student would be able to pick it up if they checked and analyzed that person over an extended period of time. So this is a good approach, just to take the time in assessing a certain teacher, whether they indeed have those inequalities.
And it's so much you talk work. You talk work as a Yagala Dawachidora. And Tanimatawa and Shoja, Ningon, the Kala Nimatawa, Tamatel Dangichida, could get a man shedding a coal engine, Sabachi on a Singomara, in a queer, and on the Jurumbu, the Chalanian can out to suck.
So just Geshe is just kind of mentioning an anecdote. This is just in jest, right? So don't take it too seriously. But Geshe has been to India earlier on this year, and a group of people joined Geshe in his trip to India, and one of them was Mark. So they hung out together for a month or over a month. And Geshe had quite a few conversations with Mark. And Geshe's English is not that good, so quite often he had to guess, what Mark was saying. He had conversations with Mark, but quite a lot of them were a guessing game. So, but Geshe reckons that at some point after a few weeks, he said that, having spent some time with Geshe, you kind of think that it's all right. That it's doing all right, right? Was it did it happen actually? All right.
This is the shim.
Yeah, in that sense, if you assess someone, if you give yourself the time to assess someone, then you can come to see who they are.
However, does somebody else want to ask a question? Sorry, I don't understand anything about this topic. Right? So then, if we have that saying that the teacher nonetheless is reflecting your light, is like a mirror to you. So when they're acting like that, it's like a mirror to you. So it seems that, yes, the guru devotion comes from your side, right? So the qualities, it's all a dependent arising in terms of the qualities that you perceive and so forth. However, where am I going with this? Is that, think about this a bit more. So it's coming from your side that, so for example, somebody else may see them as the perfect teacher, but you see them as being quite, as Geshe said, hypocritical. So that's presumably dependent on, sorry, I'm just trying to work this out, your karmic connection with them, as opposed to they are definitely hypocritical or they're definitely not hypocritical or so forth. So it's just getting clarity around the fact that, not everybody has the same connection with, just in a very highly realized lamas, as it says, not everyone has that same connection with them, or maybe with it. Yeah, just leave it like that. I don't need to go on.
All right. So I'll repeat the question.
Yeah, maybe just shorter.
All right. Maybe I'll do it longer. All right. So you said that it is said in the topic of relying upon a spiritual teacher, it says that sometimes. So Paul is saying that they can hear the question. You can hear the question. All right. So, but the people at the back of the gompa, have you had a question? All right. So you've had it. I don't need to repeat it. That's very good. Thank you very much. I can still go on my own rambling. Chezan korangi karla chio karla resena. Tadila gave shenin tensuri dilayan de labja mindam gagero. Chila soso kyun kayoba di nikyun di sansan gave shenin gi jetan dila choba jetan dila tenen na yongiresa. Chagbo dende chi chewaina yemena chi tan nang mitumba di kokla dende chi che ani chiola jawa temba di minta dende chi na ani ditawaina soso kyun dende nangires dende chi lapso dende chi yoresa shetsu chi yan ditala samatawaina kesi kuran gewe shenyin chi dende tawaina dende mi marab dende chi tonaya mi shamba di gewe shenyin di halaya dende chi ton yon sigirwa. Chezan de yan soso pachala tene yon sigirwa. Chezan konso kyalzon tsawo ilmin, yawo ilmin, chavo ilmin, dende soso yan pachala tene dende yon sigirves.
Eda du sama da pachasana da sendi tebata yichi yona, manzo tebata yichi yona, marab chena ya, ani kem mevachik. Tebata yichi mena yabu jilana ya, ani dugja sordeyachik, di yungores, ra.
Yeah, you can say that one's imprints or one's attitude also plays a role in the way that you perceive that teacher. Like, for example, if you have trust and faith and they're pure in that teacher, even when they behave quite strongly with you, faithful with you, you see that is in a positive way. Whereas without faith or trust in that person, sometimes even the positive behavior seem to you to be quite negative.
다 간지 약슈 디 가르스는 단 장관 너무 중가 버친비 다 신인 된수디 람름 첸진 총송 나로로 다 기부 셰르스 안도 디 제수 주간자 디 랑레야 장친 디 난신 체토야기 탑시 제반다 약슈레스 마도다 셰담 마부 쇼지 참말에 년고촌 안간주 레담보 고코야기 년가요레스 라.
But then since this topic is so extensive and there's so much advice or instructions that you receive in relation to that, and they also come from different perspectives, from different traditions, it is easy to get confused or to not get this topic completely. So Geshe says that to begin with, it's good to start with one system that explains the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. So Lamrim Tsongkhapa here, for example, in his either extensive presentation or middling presentation or bridge presentation presents the way to rely upon the spiritual teacher. So first off, you kind of learn the details in their entirety. Then you start to train your mind in those attitudes. If you don't develop that consistent attitude, and then you receive different instructions, different advice that are coming from different perspectives, from different traditions, there is a danger that it will cause further confusion. So rather than becoming more clear about the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher, confusion could increase.
I'm just understood Mark's question as different, that if someone has got the motivation and dedication, why do they need to go through pain? For example, like Dalai Lama or Shela, they do everything. So why do they go through the suffering and the pains? Do they do karma or what? Because this feel Dalai Lama is so good. So why does he need to go through suffering?
Tadi magi chirashi shudo, chizan dito la sana tawa ina yan samdos shembachi ko sonsa. Ta pena gyarin bochi tawude shisha wa ina ro, gyarin bochi kunon tsama tsangyan res. Ani nantang Deva Kyontang Khan number the Tsama Tsangyan Nangi Dosa. Inayan Garen Boche Tabuyan, the Dungen Yongi or was. The Gyuntan Karina, then they Tsama Yawo Chenayan, and Dungen Yotan, the Gyuntan Karinas.
Tichidang Ti Kording Yamatsar Kashi Jig Shins, Nanzugi Sang Gibi Rimba. 아니 지 상기 구수 주비 gyula soba chanzang jilaya gyunga yoba chawaina 아니 nganju mi lu rodan ji goras but di mi lu lang tsevi jilaya mi lu tok 아니 지 kega na chiki dungan jongrum di chanzang laya yodi yochi ro dan nganju gyawrum ji jede de gyawrum jilaya 구수 치 yoba mado ni yoba ji jetu yo mares Naya only which is Sangi Donga shown Shebi and Sangi Kuzu di Nanzu Jetuya Maris, Nanzu Jetuya di Mi Pami Tachi Shadan Tribu Ludi, Nanzu the Chibachi Yang Ko and Geshe Kovchin and Tama Yun Dredge Remando, the Sangi Sale K Dredge, Nanzu Jetu man, Din Jeva di Re Tagara and Donga Yoba Tungores.
Geshe has referred to a question like that before in saying that in order to understand what Buddha is, then we also need to look at the different Buddhas of body, the different bodies of Buddha, the different bodies of Buddha, and also the way to attain the different bodies of Buddha. Because in this tradition, for example, we regard His Holiness the Dalai Lama to be like a Buddha. But then what we see in His Holiness is a human being. And when you have a body as a human being, when you're born with a body of a human being, this body is coming with suffering or with pain. There's no way of avoiding it. It comes in one package. So if you have that body, you will experience that. You will have that. But then still what we see is only one body. What we see is a body of human being. But then if we regard His Holiness as Buddha, there are also other bodies that a Buddha has, but we don't see them. The only thing that we see is a human body. So for that reason, it is also important to understand the other bodies of Buddha and the way that they function.
빙모드 대우문도 아니지 고수비 차지 디 대우문도 손대문도 아니 나 기문도 나나도 세지 이거 말다스티야.
Also, Geshe said that in a way that His Holiness speaks. Probably if you're Tibetan, you can kind of relate to that better. But just the manner of speaking, it says that, for example, my knees are hurting, or my body is unwell. But rather than identifying himself with the body, he's not saying that I'm hurting or I'm unwell. It says that the knees are unwell or the body is unwell.
Go now the Naki woman, Nana said, or the combat now the Nana said, or the Gaurujil Martasra. Dingas Shivana and Gaurujilia Dungames. And the Gaurujig Nanzu Jede, Gaurumajig Shabiti, and Gaurumajig Padamagi, and the Kotano Chombi, do treasure in the D. Yordru over the Nantungoras, the Chabachivana, Peshi Yayoris.
So then a way to think about it is when we consider the physical pain, for example, or the difficulties in having a body such as that, and His Holiness says, for example, my knee hurts or my body is unwell. The way that we would speak about problems like that is that I'm unwell, I have pain. Anyway, so when we look at someone like His Holiness, then you could say that being Buddha, then there is no suffering. But still, since a body such as His Holiness's body is a body that was created in a process that also involved his mother and father, it was born in a human body, his body is not free from pain, from suffering.
And Jomden di Imbaya, Tamadi, Kunyang Divi, Kendi, and Shavaya, and Samaji Suchi, Dig Ken, and Kumanyang they were resagi. Lord, you know, did you cover that's right?
Lord, the land and the tooth and the trevoredence. Two. Yes.
Shav the tending it Samasuchi, and it Gomazors, and he didn't call you yes.
Geshe said that also in the life story of the Buddha, we said that at the end he passed away, having had some maybe an infection that he got from stepping on a thorn. Told Geshe that I thought that I've heard that he died out of food poisoning of some sort, and Geshe said that the account that he came across was that he died after having stepped on a thorn or had a splinter or what have you.
Kanji Nanzu Jetuyagi, Kuzu Dida, Monigi Sanji, Kuzu Tinibudi, Yacha Yatamata, Logares, the Inaya, Tangazu Deep Deshi, the Yagochonata, and things Sabu Shuchki, and Yunumu Shujin Gorech Greshas.
However, if you do look deeper into the makeup of the bodies, such as the body of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, then the explanation actually goes far more than that. It becomes actually quite complicated and also very extensive. So fearing that we actually don't have now the opportunity to go into that, this is how far Geshe can speak about it now. Also, to just continue with that, and Geshe is saying that jokingly, a year or two ago, he kind of sustained a really bad cut, a bad injury in his finger. He was on the verge of having to amputate his finger. And when he thought about it, he thought that my finger might be amputated. He didn't think that I will be an amputee. I think that this is the way they can say that in English. It works differently in Tibetan, but that's the way it works.
last Thursday.
So thank you very much. We have a couple of questions here on the chat, but our time is up for today. So Emilia and Catherine, if you're here next week, please ask your questions next week, and I'll promise to put them forward to Geshe. So thank you very much for that. And I'll put the dedication prayer on the screen. Tomorrow we have
prayer at 9:30 a.m.
All right.
People can join between 9:30 and 4 in the Gonfa. It'll be on YouTube 9:30 a.m. tomorrow to 9:30 a.m. Sunday.
And the details are on a Facebook page or website.
On Facebook
All right.
or on maybe not website, Facebook or YouTube. Yeah, Facebook.
So we have a new event that is likely to be occurring every Saturday for the next few weeks, in which all monastics in FBMT centers, so different monastics in FBMT centers are doing 24 hours long recitation of a prayer of Toten Gyalpo. So if you want to join in, then the link will be either on a Facebook page or our website. Our part, Chenrezig Institute part, would be from, did you say?
Chenrezig Institute YouTube, all of it.
Oh, okay. All of it would be on our YouTube channel, Chenrezig Institute. Yeah, check it out on YouTube. Anyway, so that's my announcement for now. That's the short dedication.
In the land encircled by
There's
snow
no
mountains,
mountains,
you are
yeah,
the
the source of happiness and good. All powerful
Chenrezig
Chenrezig
please remain to the sunflower hands. Savior of the, you who are causes that you are as far away as this land of
sustaining, preserving, and spreading imagination, joys, massively accomplishing, and honoring its region. Savior of myself and others, for the sacrifice, please, live long.
See you.
Just one more announcement is coffee and cake are down in the cafe for those who wish. Sorry, no lunch there at this point in time. We'll work on that one. But in the meantime, if you haven't signed on somewhere, either down in the office cafe or up here, would you please sign the legislative COVID? Would you need your address and contact details and the COVID?
Nigel and Vera, how are you? All right, see ya.